Hello, I am your host, Mr. Silver, and today I'd like to welcome you to another episode of As the NFL Coaching Carousel Turns. All right, everybody, welcome back to Splaqpaq Sports. Today we want to get into the NFL coaching carousel and how it is going to be affecting many franchises and fan bases of NFL teams around the league. There are some intriguing names that are still on the board, as well as some interesting and high-risk, high-reward candidates who have already been placed and slotted. So we want to start with the biggest domino to fall first, which was the Las Vegas Raiders. They had the controversy that went around with John Gruden and the whole email scandal, blown out of proportion as it was. In my opinion, that was mountains to molehills. However, in today's day and age with the cancel culture, this is just something you're just going to have to get used to, unfortunately. But anyway, I digress. Let's get back into sports itself. We're talking about the Las Vegas Raiders, a team that has jumped around from city to city, destroying and elevating fan bases wherever it's gone. Now, this latest iteration is in Las Vegas, and so they are looking to move forward with someone who can help develop and build around their franchise quarterback, Derek Carr. That was a consideration, a big consideration, I'm sure, when they made this risky / splashy selection in Josh McDaniels. He has been a lightning rod since his time coming into the league, being with Bill Belichick's staff and getting that team, including the GOAT Tom Brady, to a number of Super Bowls and guiding them to victory. That being said, people put a good share and fairly on Josh McDaniels' offensive prowess and how he is able to read defenses, how he's able to make adjustments on the fly. And so looking at him, it's kind of hard to look at this pick as something that is necessarily shocking. He has a pedigree, he's done it, he's still young, albeit he had the quote-unquote failed experiment in Denver, but there were a lot of things going on in that time period with him. Number one, he was very young, although highly successful, very, very young. Went in a little too brash, had a little bit too much Lane Kiffin in him, and so went in there, kind of, which is indicative and something we see with many of the coaches that fall from the Belichick coaching tree. Can anyone say Weiss? These folks, they seem to have this arrogance or hubris about themselves based on the fact that they were a part of this well-oiled machine, and to a certain extent you can't really blame them, but they a good number of them seem to have, how can you call it, that je ne sais quoi, that high self-esteem and high belief in themselves. Yet I think one of the biggest things that doomed him was the brashness with which he went after Tim Tebow. Tim Tebow was an even bigger lightning rod than him, perhaps one of the biggest lightning rods we've ever seen in the NFL. He was kind of like Kobe Bryant. You got the people who loved him and the people who hated him. He represented in this country what a half of the country loves: all-American, Christian, convicted and not convicted like felon, convicted like a belief system in his religious outlook and his faith. So for a portion of the country, and a good portion, he was a hero. To the other secular portion, who absolutely hates anyone who believes in a higher power, carries themselves with integrity, he was being looked at as, who does this guy think he is? Who is this guy? So obviously he's fake. This can't possibly be anything that's real. And so they look to torch that. But you know, that group of Americans, that half of America loves to torch everything. They want to blow it all up. So you can't blame them. You know, you got to let crazy do what crazy does. But that being said, he had to tuck his tail, go back to New England, rehab his image, which he seemed to be off to a good start with. But then came the next controversy, which was when he was highly considered for the Indianapolis coach job, which by all intents and purposes, by all accounts, he had gotten. And then in the 11th hour pulled out. So it's like, dude, come on, man, what are you doing? It's like you get your second opportunity and you get right there and you let these people spend all these resources to get to the point that they feel comfortable in selecting you, and then you pull out. Then they have to go back to the drawing board. That was kind of a dick move. I mean, you look at it and say, come on, bruh. You obviously have the pedigree, you've got the chops, we want to give you a position, and I understand if you feel you're not necessarily ready, but before it gets to that point, you can't waste a team's time and resources like that. It's a big enough business, and we're talking about owners and organizations that really don't have the time for that type of immature nonsense. However, that brings us to today, where he's officially getting his second shot, and I am interested to see what he does moving forward with the Las Vegas Raiders. Obviously, the Raiders have a big fan base all across the country. You have the luxury of drawing from a fan base that is close enough to make the drive, and then also the people who have been starved for sports in a region of the country that has the resources to sustain a sports franchise, but until a recent time period were unallowed or not allowed to have sports involved in their cities because of the whole gambling situation. So the people are hungry. They have a good fan base in Vegas. They obviously have a outreach which is very, very close to draw from. So they're not going to be hurting for ticket sales or interest, but they have to get someone in there that can put people around Derek Carr and make sure that they are, as an offense, ready to hit the ground running and use that offensive mind of Josh McDaniels to move those folks forward. All right, now we have to talk about my home team, the Minnesota Vikings. Being a Vikings fan for as many years as I have has been, it hasn't even been a love-hate relationship. It's been all hate. Let's be honest. These guys, the proverbial rug pullers. If you start believing in them, if you start hitching your wagons to these guys, they will snatch that rug out from under you and sweep you off your feet. And I don't mean in a good romantic way. I mean in making you look like the town fool in front of everyone for showing your support, for being a fanatic for the team. There's just no reason, in my opinion, to be a Vikings fan at this point. It's kind of like, if they ever win, good for them, but me, I'm pretty much checked out when it comes to these guys. Because the history has just been, it's just been absolutely a dumpster fire from beginning to end. And when they actually get to a point where they're worth a damn, they just disintegrate and they crumble like, they fall apart like a cheap suit at every possible opportunity. However, that being said, they are now in the market once again for a new head coach. And this time, the name du jour happens to be, ding, 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 one Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh, who had a great run with the San Francisco 49ers, took them to the Super Bowl with Colin Kaepernick, who absolutely had not lost his mind yet, and was a flash in the pan, two-hit wonder, if you will. You know, played well. The league had not yet caught up to what he was doing, but that's the thing about the NFL. They always catch up. You have these gimmick offenses, and the defenses will figure you out. You give a defensive coordinator a year, it's an eternity. They will figure out all of these, these wildcat offenses and whatnot. These things will come and go. But Jim Harbaugh, to his credit, with a 44-19-1 record in San Francisco, showed that he had what it took in order to successfully head coach a big franchise, a marquee franchise, and in my opinion, is an NFL coach. He is one of the recent history's biggest alumni from Michigan, so I understand why he took that position, and he had a good amount of success when he was with Stanford. So yes, he is able and he is more than competent on the collegiate level. However, I think his talents and his disposition and the way in which he communicates is much more conducive to dealing with grown men professionals. And so I think the way that he is able to get into not just the mindset, but having been an NFL quarterback himself, he understands what it takes. He understands the mentality. He understands the psychology. He understands the emotion that goes into it. And he is able to really resonate with the members of his team and coaching staff. So in that respect, I think this is actually a good target to be going after. However, that is not the only candidate that the Minnesota Vikings have on their radar at the moment. So let's get into the other candidates that are actually being considered in Minnesota. All right, the first candidate that we're going to be speaking on is Patrick Graham, defensive coordinator for the New York Giants. Got to the Giants in 2016 as the offensive line coach and has steadily progressed up through there. The man understands defense, has been, on the radar for teams for quite a while here, and is looking to get his second interview coming up with the Vikings. And so you can't underestimate the fact of the day and age we're in right now. There's a big uproar of people, especially in the news media, pushing for black head coaching candidates, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but you can tell they're being disingenuous and they're just trying to push a narrative. And so it kind of, I know it's supposed to be about fairness and the dreaded word equity, which just means something abhorrent, but it's supposed to be about the candidates. But as in every other thing and every other part of American culture, the media wants to make it about themselves. They are the proverbial ref thinking the game is about them when the players are actually playing the game on the field. So the media wants to tell you that you got to have this black coach, you got to have this black coach, you got to have this black coach. And I think for sure that black coaches need to be seriously considered and have and be able to be on an equal footing. And so, they'll keep bringing up the names like Eric Bieniemy. And it's funny because it's like, is that the only black coaching candidate? And is he the only one qualified? Because you see people, especially on ESPN, constantly harping on Bieniemy. Yes, great. But there are some other black head coaching candidates who also have a good amount of experience. They have the chops for the position. And so, when you get 5 and 6 different networks talking the same talking points, you understand there's a narrative that's been put down from someone on high saying we need to push this here agenda or narrative. So it seems to me to be to the exclusion of other equally successful and equally qualified black coaching candidates, not the least of which is Patrick Graham. All right, y'all, number 2, we're going to talk about Kevin OConnell. And when we're looking at these next 2 candidates, we're talking about the coordinators for the NFC champion Los Angeles Rams. Everyone knows that with success becomes opportunity, especially in the NFL coaching circles. So the fact that the Rams are in the Super Bowl, the offensive coordinators are most assuredly going to be getting good looks from teams that are looking to make head coaching changes. Matthew Stafford, franchise quarterback, looking at him and what OConnell has been able to do by utilizing those tools, especially considering the fact they got rid of Jared Goff, brought in an upgrade. And Matthew Stafford, to be sure, has his drawbacks, he has his flaws, but with the offensive mind and the flashy showtime type of offense that a guy with an arm like Stafford's can execute, you can see how OConnell is being looked at as someone, if you're looking to have your team up its firepower, up its offensive output, then this is a guy you should be looking for. And now is the put up or shut up time for Kirk Cousins. Now, you talk about a quarterback who's lived a charmed life, who hasn't done but so much, but has been in the right place, right time of NFL history where contracts are being given out based on certain criteria. This guy has been able to live in the chaos, be able to hide in the cut, and be able to let the controversial winds, if you will, blow over him while he moves forward. And there are glimpses about Kirk Cousins that make you want to believe, but once again, you put those 2 things together. You put the disastrous recipe of the Minnesota Vikings and their history, and Kirk Cousins, who has shown you that he will tease you. He's going to end up giving you blue balls. That's Kirk Cousins, and that's most assuredly the Vikings. So that's a match made in purgatory, to be sure. Yet, when it comes to NFL teams, they don't have the luxury of throwing in the towel like I did on their franchise, so they must move forward with someone that they believe can get it done. And Kevin OConnell represents as good a choice as any to try to squeeze the last little bit of juice out of the lemon in Kirk Cousins. All right, and now we have to come to the 3rd coaching candidate, alternate, if you will, because I'm still under the impression that Jim Harbaugh will come out, if interested, in being the selection for the Minnesota Vikings. But last but not least, and not the least of which, we have to talk about Raheem Morris, the defensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams. This guy, he's been an interim coach before with Atlanta. Numbers weren't so great, 4 wins, I believe 7 losses, whatnot, but he was put in a position where he had to come in, bring people up from the disaster that he was given, and so the man had to build it out of the mud. But he has a good name, he has a solid reputation. People know the guy. He's proven himself. He has a little bit of pedigree under him. He's actually been in the position before, and from what I hear, in his second interview, in his first interview with the Vikings, he impressed so much that they brought him in for a second interview, which I know some of you are going to say, well, they have to bring in every black candidate for a second interview in order to satisfy the Rooney Rule criteria, to make sure that that's satisfied so that they don't find themselves subject to lawsuits. But with all 4 of these candidates, I can see how the fan bases would be they can make a point for each of them in order to psych themselves out or to pump themselves up into believing in these candidates, because what we had going on just didn't work out. I think he was somewhat of a man out of time, and so we're looking for some fresh blood and some new innovation and some names. And if the minority candidates who are being considered are given the position, I'll look at it as, well, they're qualified. I don't have a sense in my head that they're just being pushed in so that they don't have to deal with the social media and social justice BS backlash. So I wouldn't have a problem with any of the candidates. However, I will go on record and say my true belief is that they're probably going to end up with Jim Harbaugh, which for a city like Minneapolis will give them some cachet and breathe some new life into the fan base and some excitement around the city. All right, that's going to wrap it up for us today on Splaqpaq Sports. Hope to see you all again. This is the Honorable Mr. Silver coming at you, and we just want to bid you adieu and say peace, y'all. We out.